If you're a school leader, you know you're facing a huge challenge, one that kind of lives in your servers and spreadsheets. We're talking about the beast of school data. So today, we're not just going to face this beast, we're actually going to learn how to tame it.
This quote right here, it just perfectly captures the problem, doesn't it? Your school's data isn't one neat little thing. It's a multi-headed beast. And every single one of those heads represents a different risk, a different system, and honestly, a different headache. So in this explainer, we're going to map out this beast, really understand its dangers, and figure out how to get it back under control.
All right, first things first, we need to meet this beast. It's living inside every school's digital walls, and a lot of the time, it's growing more and more complex without anyone even realizing it. Understanding where it comes from, that's the essential first step. Okay, so at the very core of the beast is its heart, or maybe its body, you could say. That's the Management Information System, the MIS. Now, this is supposed to be the single source of truth for all your critical student and staff info. In a perfect world, all your data would just live right here, totally safe and sound. But, we don't live in a perfect world. The reality is, your data is constantly being copied from that MIS and shot out to dozens of other apps. And every single time you add a new tool, a new head sprouts on the beast, creating another separate, fragmented copy of your school's information. And I bet these heads look pretty familiar, right? An app for tracking assessments, another for managing behavior, tools for communicating with parents. Look, each one is useful on its own for sure. But each one pulls a copy of your data, creating inconsistencies and ramping up the risk. And if you're part of a multi-academy trust, this problem just multiplies across every single school in your network. It's huge!
This data beast isn't just messy, it is genuinely dangerous. Every extra copy of your data exposes you to stuff like ransomware attacks that can shut down an entire trust, phishing attempts that trick your staff, and all kinds of vulnerabilities in your software. The scariest part? A breach in one of those third-party apps, that becomes your breach.
So, all this risk brings us to our next big challenge, GDPR. Because you see, taming this beast isn't just a technical problem, it's a legal one. And if you fail to comply, you're basically feeding the beast with massive fines and serious reputational damage. So how do you control it? Well, you need the right beast taming toolkit, and that's exactly what these mandatory GDPR documents are. Think of your data protection policy as your overall strategy. The privacy notice, that tells people how you use their data. A retention policy stops you from holding on to data for way too long. And a breach response plan, well, that's your fire extinguisher for when things really go wrong. And if a breach does happen, having a clear plan is everything. This is not the time to panic. It's time for a simple four-step process. First, recognize there's a problem. Then, respond immediately to contain it. Next, notify the authorities if you have to. And finally, communicate with anyone affected if the risk is high. Simple, clear, and absolutely essential. Okay, but what happens when you decide you want to change the very heart of the beast, your MIS? This is where the battle for control over your own data gets very, very real and, well, very complicated. You see, for over a decade, switching systems was pretty straightforward. Schools could just take a full backup of their database. It's called a .bak file, and hand it over to their new supplier. Easy. But recently, a major supplier, ESS Sims, completely changed the rules. They don't allow this anymore. Now, they're forcing schools to use more restrictive, more expensive, and often incomplete methods. It's made it so much harder for schools to just exercise their right to choose their own systems. And this has sparked a real fight. In response to legal threats from the incumbent, some of the challenger suppliers like Bromcom are really stepping up. This quote is from their switching guarantee, where they're literally promising to cover legal costs for schools that migrate. It's a really bold move, and it's all designed to reassure school leaders that they can, and absolutely should, stay in control of their own data. Taming the data beast isn't just about the technology and the contracts. Often, the hardest part is managing the human side of the whole thing, the people who have to live with these changes day in and day out. Sound familiar? Yeah, these are the classic phrases of resistance. As a school leader, hearing this can be incredibly frustrating, right? Especially when you know a change is for the better. But this resistance, it doesn't come from a bad place. It actually comes from human psychology. The key to understanding all of this is a concept called loss aversion. Basically, our brains are hardwired to feel the pain of a loss way more intensely than the pleasure of a gain. So, for a teacher, that perceived loss of time, of comfort with an old system, or the stress of learning something new, that often feels so much bigger than the potential gain of a more efficient system weighed on the line.
So, that leads to the crucial question, doesn't it? How can you, as a leader, overcome this? How do you reframe the whole conversation away from what staff feel they're losing to what the entire school community stands to gain?
While the solution is to actively remove those perceived losses, and this roadmap shows you exactly how. You allocate dedicated time so staff don't feel like they're losing their own. You model the change so it's not some scary unknown. You break it all down into small, easy steps, and crucially, you involve your staff in the process and reward their engagement. That's how you turn resistors into champions. And all of this brings us to our final and honestly, our most important point. Taming the data beast isn't just some administrative task or an IT project. It is a fundamental test of leadership.
This right here is the key takeaway from our entire explainer. Managing your data and making sure it's secure is a strategic priority. It belongs in the boardroom, not just the server room. At the end of the day, it's about protecting your students, your staff, and the very reputation of your institution.
So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. Right now, in your school or your trust, is your data a well-managed, tamed asset that's actually serving your educational mission? Or is it an untamed, multi-headed beast just waiting to cause chaos? The choice and the responsibility is yours.